Hi there. Welcome to Baking Live with Bryan. I'm so happy to have you. So excited to have you. We have a couple viewers on now. I'm going to give it a few minutes just to see if anybody else, hopefully other people will join us. But thank you to those of you who are watching. I'm very excited to have you, and I hope you guys are excited to be here with me. We're going to be making something that's really, really good that I've made before. I've made for a lot of other people, and that I'm excited to share with you. It's a really simple recipe. If you haven't already gone on to my Facebook page, Bryan's Bakery, go ahead now over there. Well, obviously you've gone there because you've found the video. The recipe is posted on there for you guys to enjoy. And I'll be, if you're following along cooking with me, which I know some of you are, we have a couple people that have already messaged me and had some questions about it. And they are cooking along with me. If you are cooking along with me, if you have any questions, please type your questions in the comments. I can answer them live on air. I'll be following the recipe along with you. So if you want to go ahead and grab the recipe, we'll be going along with it together. I'm going to be making obviously the same exact thing, showing you all the different steps that are necessary, all the different techniques, all the little tips that I do while making the recipe, and hopefully you'll learn something, and hopefully you'll have fun and join us for the next video, which hopefully will be next Sunday. I'm looking to make this a weekly thing. I'll set up polls like I did for this one to see what people want me to make. If you have any recommendations, if anybody has something that they want to make, that they want to see me make. Sometimes people have recipes that they feel a little intimidated about. That's great. Send those recipes to me. We'll make them together. I kind of want this to be an open platform thing. It's going to work best with question and answers, with you guys interacting. It'll make it a lot more fun, a lot more lively. So,
Schimberg says hi.
who does?
Jeff.
Jeff Schimberg says hi. They are, Jeffrey and Katie are cooking along with us. So hi to them, and I hope they're excited. Katie already has sent me a whole bunch of questions about the recipe. So yeah, how many viewers are we up to?
We have 22.
We have 22 viewers. That's amazing. That's two more than I wanted to. So great. We're going to go ahead and get started since we have so many viewers on already. Yeah, so the recipe that we're making is called, they're called traditional Jewish Rugalach, and you have to hach when you say it, otherwise it doesn't count. So they're traditional Jewish Rugalach, and they are they're little cookies. They're kind of cakey. They're kind of flaky. They look like little croissants. If you've ever done a Google search for them, they look like little rolled croissant cookies, filled with a wide variety of different things. I'm filling mine today with raspberry jam and a little bit of cinnamon and sugar. I've seen them filled with nuts, with chocolate, with you can use Nutella, hazelnut spread. Pretty much the sky's the limit. Any kind of jam that you can find on the shelf, you can spread into these. They're super easy. It's a super quick recipe, something easy and quick to make for a Shabbat dinner, for a festive holiday, just to have on top of the fridge to eat in the middle of the night. So yeah, let's get started. We're going to make the dough first. It's a very basic dough. You'll actually notice if you're looking at the recipe, the dough itself does not have any sugar in it. It's a blank canvas dough, so it could be used either for savory or sweet applications. Excuse me, I've actually thought about making like a cream cheese artichoke spinach spread, putting that in there, rolling it up and making like an appetizer. This would be perfect for that. The dough essentially has 4 ingredients: bread flour, all-purpose flour, salt, butter, and cream cheese. I'm sorry, that's 5 ingredients. And it's a basic dough. So let's start with the ingredients. The bread flour. Bread flour is a high gluten flour, mainly used for making bread. Obviously, that's why I call it bread flour. Gluten is a protein that is formed when you mix a wheat flour and water together. There's a chemical reaction, and the protein called gluten is formed. Gluten is what gives the dough its elasticity. It's what gives bread its chewy texture. It's something that some people are allergic to, so they're actually allergic to the protein in the bread, not the flour itself, if you have celiac disease. So bread flour has a higher protein content than other flours. All-purpose flour is kind of in the middle. Cake flour is at the opposite end of the spectrum, has the lowest amount of gluten in it, because you want that for a light flaky or a light cake. You want something that's not chewy. So we're combining bread flour and all-purpose flour, which is going to give us kind of an in-between texture to the dough. It's going to help to keep it a little bit flaky. It's still going to give it a nice little texture. All-purpose flour, obviously you can buy that on the shelf. So, I'm sorry, back to the bread flour real quick. I'm going to show you what I use here. This is King Arthur bread flour. King Arthur is a really good brand of flour to use. It's what I use for breads, for cakes, for pastries, pretty much everything I do. They make an all-purpose, they make a bread, they make a whole wheat, I think they make a pastry flour too. We actually use it at the bakery that I work in. We use King Arthur flour there as well. So this is the King Arthur bread flour. It's an unbleached flour. Something really cool about King Arthur flours on the back, they actually have the protein content. I don't know if we can get a close-up of that. Let's see if this works. We're going to go to our up close. There we go. So you can see that it has the protein content on there. It's 12.7%. All of their bags of flour have the different protein contents on the back. It's just something fun. It's called their Flour IQ. So we're going to move over to our mixer and we're going to scale out. So a lot of baking recipes are scaled and not necessarily cups or tablespoons or scaled recipes. So if you don't have a scale, that's fine. It's going to be 2 cups of bread flour and a half a cup of all-purpose flour. But I do have a scale. So we're going to go ahead and zero out our scale. And we're going to measure. I'm actually going to do a half a times this recipe. But if we're following, it's the same method. So I'm going to be measuring 5 ounces of bread flour. If you are measuring by cup, actually this is something good to mention. If you are measuring by cup, then when you measure dry ingredients with a cup, you want to use a knife and you're going to scoop into the flour and you're going to tap it into it to make sure that it fills all the crevices, and then you're going to go like that. And you want to get an even, smooth top, and that's actually half a cup. That's a half a cup of flour. A good way to measure dry ingredients. Use a knife. So that's just about 5 ounces there. So we're going to put that into the mixer. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm not even following my own directions. Let's go back a little bit. First, we're going to cream the cream cheese and the butter. That's what I get for not having the recipe in front of me. We're going to take our butter and our cream cheese, and we're using just unsalted whole real butter, the real deal, not the fake deal. So I'm using half a recipe, so I'm gonna use 1.5 sticks of butter, and then 10 ounces of cream cheese. So I'm using, again, all real whole fat cream cheese, not the fake stuff, not the fat free, not the Neufchâtel or however you pronounce it, the real deal. And we're gonna put that in. And we're going to cream the butter and the cream cheese together to make it so that it's a smooth, even consistency. I want to make sure I get all the last little bits in there. So that's 8 ounces, and then we need 2 more ounces of cream cheese because I'm doing half the recipe, so that'll be right. Yeah. So 2 more ounces. All right, so that's in. If you're using a stand mixer, then that's what I'm using here, a KitchenAid stand mixer. We're going to be using the paddle attachment. If you're using a hand mixer, you want to use the dough hooks for this. And might get a little loud, sorry about that. Before we turn it on, essentially what I'm doing is I'm creaming the cream cheese and the butter together. We want it to be a uniform color. It's going to get a little bit light and fluffy, which is great. That's just going to add a little bit of lightness to the dough. So we're going to go ahead. All right. Very important thing to do is scrape down as well, just to make sure that you get all of the ingredients evenly mixed in. We're looking pretty good. It's looking like it's pretty mixed together. one more shot. Okay, now we're going to add the flour. At this point, it's not that important to get all of the stuff off of the beater because it's going to go back in and mix it anyway. So I'm not too concerned about it being clean here. We're going to double check our measurement here. How many viewers are we up to?
36.
36. Oh my goodness gracious. All right, so in goes the bread flour. And then we're going to do the same thing with the all-purpose, just not as much. And we have 2 ounces of bread flour. That's going to go in. And then we're going to do our salt. And that's going to go in as well. I use kosher salt for everything I do. Doesn't matter what brand, kosher salt. Kosher salt is a pure salt. There's no added ingredients. There's no iodine. Regular table salt is iodized. It has iodine in it. Kosher salt is not. If we want to get technical, it's used for koshering meats, which is why it's called kosher salt and why it's pure salt, because it just has to be salt to draw out the blood of the meats. But that's for another show. So I'm just going to use a pinch of salt. Salt in a recipe, aside from flavor, it actually is a tenderizer. So it's going to tenderize the meat, or not the meat. Well, it does tenderize meat, but it's going to tenderize the dough and make it more crispy and flaky and fluffy. So, excuse me. Just follow the recipe. Bread flour, flour, and salt going in. Very important. Katie and Jeff especially. Do not start your mixer on high. You want to make sure that you start on the lowest possible level, because if you have dry ingredients in here and you crank it up to high, it's going to be all over the kitchen, all over the ceiling. Good thing to note. It's also good if you have a lot of dry ingredients, like if you're making buttercream, American buttercream icing, which is shortening butter and powdered sugar. There's a lot of powdered sugar in that recipe. A good thing to do is to pulse it on and off. KitchenAids are made for, are indestructible, almost indestructible, but it's safe to just pulse it like I'm going to do now. Just to kind of initially get it incorporated, and then it's safe to turn on. With this, I'll turn that off while I'm talking. With this dough, you don't want to overmix it. You just want to mix it enough to incorporate the flour into the butter. And it's just starting to come together. We're going to give it another couple minutes, another couple seconds in the mixer, and then we're going to turn it out and finish it on the countertop, which is a lot of fun. A little bit messy. Can they still hear me over the mixer? Okay, good. So we're going to let it mix just till it starts to come together. There's a few little crumbs on the bottom, but that's fine. That's as far as we're going to go in the mixer. So I'm going to take it out and show it to you so you guys can see. It doesn't look like a really soft, nice, light dough. It still looks like a little bit of a crumbly mess, but that is fine. That is what you want. Crumbly messes mean good, short, flaky pastry. Like if you've ever had a shortbread cookie or something, it's crumbly like this. Now for the fun part. I use, whenever I'm rolling out or doing anything on the tabletop with dough, I use the bread flour as my flour that I put on the counter to prevent sticking. So we're going to use a generous amount of flour on the table. Am I moving too fast for anybody? Everybody doing good? Everybody keeping up? Okay, good. I can hear all of you talking to me. So we're going to get all the dough off the beater, or most of it. Hopefully I'm not boring anybody yet. And if I am, don't tell me. Oh, look at that. My technical production manager is able to bring me the comments. Oh, I look beautiful. So there's a little bit of a delay going on between what I'm doing and what you're seeing, which is kind of fun. Okay, so we're going to take the dough out. and get it all out of there. You're going to get a little messy. Don't worry about it. If there's any little flour crumbs in the bottom, that is beautiful. Get those into this mass. We're going to get rid of our bowl. And we're just very lightly, very, very lightly, we're going to start kneading just until the dough comes together. Again, we don't want to overmix because that's going to produce too much gluten and make it too tough. And we're not going to have a beautiful flaky flaky pastry. But see, it's already a little bit smoother, a little bit beautifuler, and that's where we're going to leave it. We're going to leave it there. We're going to cut it into two portions. Grab a knife. We're going to cut it into two portions. And this is going to go in the fridge. At this point, if you are playing along at home with us, this is pretty much the end of the play at home round, because you have to let the dough chill for about 30 minutes. 30 minutes to an hour. You want it to be nice and stiff in the fridge before you pull it out and work with it. It's a little too soft to roll out right now. Can you make it with just AP flour? Yes. So all-purpose flour is just that. It's all-purpose. It works for anything. So it's not super important to use bread flour, but you know, it's just what the recipe calls for. Yes, you can use all-purpose flour. Absolutely. When you put it into the Ziploc bag, we're going to push it down really thin, so it's a little bit easier to roll out at a later point. It'll also chill a lot quicker. When you press it thin like that, it's going to chill a lot quicker, so you'll be able to use it a little bit sooner. I have to grab another bag for my other. Bear with me for a minute. We're going to put the other one in. So as you can see, this is actually going to make a nice amount of cookies. From just one batch of dough. You'll easily get 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. You'll easily get 20 to 24 cookies out of one batch of dough. So we're going to take these. They're going to go in the fridge. They're going to sit in the fridge for about an hour. And through the magic of television, I have some that's already ready to go. So you can see it's a lot stiffer. I'll take it out of the bag. We're going to keep our floured work surface because we're going to go right back onto it. So as you can see, it's a lot stiffer. It's not a flimsy dough. It's a nice stiff. And I don't know if you can see. I don't know if you can see, but there are some striations, and that's fine because that is the butter and the cream cheese layering in with the flour and the dough. Excuse me. And that's going to give us the wonderful flaky, light pastry. All right, so now we're switching gears and we're going to start rolling out the cookies. You need a rolling pin, or in Katie and Jeff's situation, they don't have a rolling pin. What you can also use, which hopefully most of you have at home, is a empty bottle of wine. You can actually use a full bottle of wine too. But this will work just as well as a rolling pin. If you want, you can cover it in a little bit of plastic wrap just so that your label isn't touching the dough. But this works just as well as a rolling pin. Don't put too much pressure on the neck because you might break it. You're going to work, just like you would with a rolling pin. But luckily enough, I have a rolling pin. So those of you that have a rolling pin, grab it. Those of you that don't grab it. So we're going to flour the top of the dough just to prevent any sticking. And then we're going to start rolling. You're going to notice that it does feel really hard and stiff, and it doesn't feel like you're really doing much, but you actually are. You're softening the dough just a little bit every time, and you'll notice that I'm turning the dough every time, and that is... Oh, we have another question. Can you leave the dough in the fridge longer, like overnight? Yes. I actually made a batch of the dough last night, which is what I'm working with now. Left it in overnight, and it's perfectly fine. You can actually, if you want to make the dough ahead and keep it in the freezer, let it refrigerate overnight, and then take it out and wrap it with plastic wrap, and then put it back in a Ziploc bag, and it can stay in the freezer probably for about 6 months. It'll be good. Just before you roll it out, you don't want to roll it out from the freezer because it's going to be way too hard and you'll break your rolling pin. So if you're going to use it from the freezer, bring it out, either let it sit on the countertop for about 20 to 25 minutes or leave it in the fridge for a couple hours to soften up. You want to work a little bit quickly with this dough, though, because you do want it to stay cold as you're working with it so that it doesn't get too sticky. Every time I roll, I'm turning about 90 degrees for 2 reasons. One, it prevents sticking. It prevents the dough from sticking on the bottom of onto the countertop. It also allows me to make sure that I'm doing a circle, because the end result, we want to have a circle. So that's why I'm turning it, because it just keeps the circle shape. And it makes sure that you're evenly rolling out the dough. You can see the cracks starting to form along the edge. That is good, because that means that you're actually doing something and it's rolling out. So even though it feels a little stiff and that you're not doing anything, the cracks mean it is, and it's working, and it's beautiful, and you're turning and it's not sticking. If it does start to stick, add a little bit more flour. If it does start to stick too much, throw it back in the fridge or the freezer for a few minutes to chill back up. That means your dough was sitting out too long, it got a little too warm. Not a big deal. Just throw it back in the fridge, throw it on a cookie sheet or something, throw it in the fridge or the freezer, and it will cool it. But we're not sticking, so that's a beautiful thing. We do have a little hole, I don't know if you can see it or not, forming. Not a big deal. Just push it back together. We're rolling out to about 1/4 inch. And that will make for a nice thin cookie, because these cookies ending up are going to be rolled out, are going to be rolled up like a croissant, so you don't want it to be too thick, otherwise the cookie is not going to cook in the center, and you're going to have a raw dough in the center. So that is pretty much what we're going for. It's beautiful. It's flaky. As I'm looking at it now, I don't know if you guys can see it. As I'm looking at it now, though, you can definitely see more of the striations of the butter and cream cheese through the dough. And that is where we're going to leave it. So now, grab yourself something round. Doesn't necessarily have to be a cake pan. This is about a 10-inch round cake pan. The edge is probably about 11 inches. You just want something round. It could be a plate, it could be a bowl, it could be a cake pan. Anything round that's about 10 inches around. We're going to set that on top, just like that. And you're going to grab a little paring knife. And we're just going to cut around. And you're going to cut out a circle. And now you're done with the pan. Now, very important. This, you can reuse this scrap dough. So you don't want to bunch it up into a ball, kind of like if you're doing pie dough, same kind of thing. Extra dough, you don't want to bunch up into the ball, because 2 reasons. It's going to overwork the dough and it's going to make it tough, and that's definitely not what we want. It's also going to mix the cream cheese and butter more into the dough, and you're gonna lose the flakiness. So especially pie dough, you want those nice flaky layers, which is why you use cold butter and you cut it into cubes and you don't mix it completely into the flour. That is to create the flakiness in the layers. So we're gonna just very lightly fold the dough so you're still keeping the layers intact, and that's it. And then it's gonna go back in the bag and back into the fridge and can be used for something else at a later time. This dough will actually make good hamantaschen as well. So you can save the scraps for that, and you can roll them out and make hamantaschen with it. So we're going to throw this back in the fridge. And I'm going to show you how thin we have it. Can they see how thin it is? It's beautiful. It's thin. It's even. So it's a nice thin. I would say it's about 1/4 inch, maybe a little thinner than that. But it's perfect. Beautiful. Grab yourself a brush, any paintbrush, any kind of pastry brush or anything. We're just going to brush off some of the excess flour from the bottom. Nice and clean. All right. At this point, we're going to put the filling into it. We're going to put the filling in before we cut it, because it's going to make it easier to add the fillings. I'm using raspberry jam because of this whole people shopping too much thing. This was I was not able to find my seedless raspberry jam. I prefer to use seedless. Some people like the seeds. Some people don't like the seeds. I don't like the seeds. Regardless, we're using raspberry jam, seeded raspberry jam. Hero brand is a really, really good brand of jam to use for baking. It's something that we use in the industry, in the kitchens, in the bake shops. Hero jam is something that we use. So that's what I bought at the store. I got this at Giant. They had more than just raspberry flavor. I think they had a strawberry. They might have had an orange marmalade flavor. Any of those flavors will work, so long as it's a jam. The difference between jelly and jam is must be jelly because the jam don't shake. No. The difference between jam and jelly. Jam is made with whole fruit, fruit, sugar, pectin, and a little bit of citric acid, and that's it. It's just cooked down till it's thick. Jelly is made with fruit juice and sugar and other coagulating agents. So if you put jelly in the oven, it's going to just run and burn all over the place. You put jam in the oven, it is not going to. Do we have any? Love Hamantaschen. Oh, yeah. Okay, so back to it. We're going to take some jam, and we're going to spread it on. Get a nice smear going on. I think the recipe says like 2 to 4 tablespoons. I have some friends checking in from Florida. Josh and hopefully Rihanna. They work at Disney, which is where I met them. So they're sitting at home because Disney is closed because of this whole nightmarish pandemic. Okay, so a nice even layer of jam. You can use a spoon. You don't have to use a fancy spatula. Spread that over. And then cinnamon sugar. How many viewers? We're still at 22, right? 21? Oh, no, they're dropping like flies. We're going to sprinkle some cinnamon sugar over it. I hope I'm still not boring anybody. Nice even layer. I would say about maybe 3 teaspoons or 1 tablespoon of that. Then we're going to take a pizza cutter. Actually, before we cut, we want to prep our pan. So I'm using a sheet pan. You can buy these at Walmart. You can buy them on Amazon. You can buy them at Sam's Club. I think is where I got these. Target probably has them. This is a standard sheet pan size sheet pan. Don't really know what the measurements are. I just know that it's a half sheet pan size. It fits in most ovens. Most ovens, not all ovens. So to prep it, we're going to use parchment paper. If you can't find parchment paper, I said in the recipe, just line it with aluminum foil and then give it a light spray. I'm showing you a lot of my favorite things right now in this episode. Pan for baking is a godsend. This is something that I found a couple years ago. I use it for anything that I bake. Bundt cakes, cupcakes, my layer cakes, I use pan for baking. You don't need to spray in flour. You don't need to butter in flour. It's got everything in here, and it is a miracle worker. I mean, you can use it on the toughest, most intricate little bundt cake, and the cake will just fall right out of the pan. So this is great. So if you don't have parchment paper, put a little bit of aluminum foil and then spray it with a little bit of pan for baking, and you're set to go. I also found, while I was shopping at Giant yesterday, Reynolds makes these little pop-up parchment sheets, which are amazing. And that is what I'm using here. So we're going to use 2 sheets, and we're going to line our pan with parchment. How easy was that? Wonderful. Alright, and now, back to the dough. You're going to take a cookie cutter, pizza cutter, dough cutter, whatever you want to call this. And we're going to cut it like a pizza. So in half makes 2 halves. Again makes 4 quarters. Again makes 6. And again makes 8. And that is it. If it sticks to the cookie cutter, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But this is the base for our cookies. So now, at this point, if you wanted to add nuts or something, you would add them when you spread the jam on. Chopped pecans, chopped walnuts, whatever you want to use in there. Half sheet pan. Oh, okay. So one of my friends that's watching is Chef Michelle Mitchell. I worked with her at Hotel DuPont in Delaware. Amazing woman. You should actually go over to her page, Michelle Mitchell Pastry. I don't know what it is. She'll have to remind me. Michelle Mitchell Pastry Incorporated Company, something. She's doing a demo at 3 o'clock this afternoon on. I'm actually not sure what the topic is. Michelle, let me know what the topic is, and I'll give you a shout out. But so she said that the half sheet pan is traditionally 16 by 12, or is usually 16 by 12. So that's what I'm using. Wonderful. So we're going to take the cookie, and starting with the fatter end, we're going to roll it up just like a croissant. Maybe in more of a later show, I'll show you how to make croissants. That's a whole nother ship that'll sail. But we're going to roll it up just to the tip, just the tip, and that is it. That's our little cookie. How beautiful is that? Can we get a close-up shot of that? Because it is amazing. Close-up shot. Oh, we got it. Okay, good. And we're just going to lay them on the sheet pan. I think the recipe I said 2 by 10. That's a little too many. I think we're going to do 2 by 4 on this cookie sheet here. So I'm just going to roll the rest of these up real quick for you. When you lay them on the sheet pan, you want to make sure that you lay the pointed side down. So you're going to take the pointed side and put that underneath on the bottom. Lay that down, give it a little press if you have to. That way, when they bake, it'll prevent them from unraveling and unrolling. Oh, today's Sunday. Michelle's doing cooking with Michelle and Chuck. I think they're making dinner. I don't know what they're making. But you should definitely go over to their page after you're done here at 2 o'clock and watch what they make. She's been doing cooking shows, I think, all week. I know she did macaroons. She did fondant flowers, roses, or marzipan roses. She's fun. Great person. Real quick. Oh, this might also get a little messy. Some of the raspberry jam might kind of squish out if you roll too hard. I'm not rolling very tightly. It's just really lightly. I'm rolling up the edge a little loose. And then just real lightly, gently rolling up the rest of it. If I'll do one that's a little too tough, a little too rough with it, so that Jeffrey knows what not to do. If you roll it too tight, then all the jam is going to squish out. It's actually not too bad, but the jam squishes out and it doesn't look pretty. It's too tight. If you roll it too tight, the center of the cookie might not bake all the way. Oh, Rihanna says hi. You're making one of my favorites. Well, that's wonderful, Rihanna. You should come up and taste them. You should come up and have some sometime with me. All right. So at this point, let me clean my hands off a little bit. At this point, the cookies are pretty much done, ready to be baked. We're going to put them in the freezer. You want to let them chill again. We're going to put them in the freezer for about 15 minutes. You want them to chill again before they bake. That way they keep the beautiful shape that we just spent so much time making. If you put them right into the oven, the butter is still a little soft. So the butter and cream cheese is soft, so it's kind of going to melt before it has a chance to bake and puff up and make the nice layers. Let's talk about that for a second. So with like puff pastry, with Danish dough, when you're making those beautiful layers of butter and dough, you're actually creating pockets that when they go in the oven, the butter is going to melt and create steam, and that's going to create a pocket and make that fluff and that nice layer in between the layers of dough. It's called mechanical leavening as opposed to chemical leavening, which is when you use baking powder or baking soda. Mechanical leavening is when the butter or whatever, the shortening, melts in the oven and then mechanically puffs up with the steam and creates the layers. That's what we got going in here because there's no baking powder, there's no baking soda. It's just mechanical leavening. So let's say we just pulled these out of the freezer. We have to egg wash them before they go in the oven. So now we're going to make a basic egg wash. A couple of different skills that we're going to learn here. We're going to learn how to separate an egg, which is one of my mother's favorite things to do. Not really. Whenever she looks at a recipe and that starts out with separate the eggs, she will flip the page and move to the next recipe. Hi, Mom. So we're going to crack the egg. We're going to use one whole egg, and then we're going to use one egg yolk. And this is a recipe. I know it sounds silly that you have a recipe for egg wash. This is a recipe that I learned when I was in culinary school in New York at Culinary Institute of America. by a really renowned pastry chef. His name is Dieter Schoner. And he taught us this recipe for egg wash, and that is the only one I ever use. So it's one egg yolk, and then a shot of heavy cream or milk. I prefer to use heavy cream. And that's it. We're going to whisk that together until it's a nice, even, well combined color. And that is it. That is our egg wash. How much time are we at? Do we know?
We're at 37 minutes.
Oh, I have 44 people watching. Oh my gosh. We're at how long?
About 40 minutes.
Oh, beautiful. We're right on time. Take a brush, same brush you use to brush off the flour. Could be a paintbrush, can be any kind of brush. You don't want a really small brush. I'm going to dip it in, and then we're just lightly going to brush a little bit of egg wash all over the Rugalach. And some of you may be asking, well, what does egg wash do to the Rugalach? That is a wonderful question, someone. The egg wash is going to do two things. It's going to act like a glue. We're going to sprinkle some cinnamon sugar on top of it, and the egg wash is going to help to glue the cinnamon sugar to the cookie. It's also going to give it a nice, beautiful shine, a nice dark brown color, which actually is why we add the milk or the cream to it. It's going to add to the nice golden brown color, and the egg is going to give it a nice shine once it's baked. So real quick, we're going to finish that up. We're going to call that squishy one the Jeffrey. Did she say something? Can you use water, or what can you use instead of dairy? Yeah, so you can use water. I would actually use nothing before I would use water. If you wanted to use a non-dairy milk, you can use almond milk, you can use cashew milk, you can use, coconut milk. Coconut milk would actually give it a nice little flavor. You can use non-dairy creamer or Parve creamer. But if you don't want to use dairy in it, I would just go with nothing and just use the one egg and one egg yolk for your egg wash. That's all done. They're ready to go in the oven. So we have our oven preheated to 350 degrees. These are going to go in for about 25 to 30 minutes. You're going to know when they're done when the jam, remember it's jam, not jelly, when the jam kind of bubbles and oozes out of the sides. And then if you flip it over and you see that the bottom is nicely golden brown, then you know they're done. It takes, the ones I did took about 25 to 30 minutes. But yeah, so we're going to put these in the oven. And through the magic of television, oh my goodness gracious, what do we have in here but some finished Rugalach cookies? So this is what we want the finished product to look like. You can see they have a really nice golden brown color, and I don't know if you guys can see the little shine on them. The egg wash gave it a nice brown little color. Actually, we did forget to sprinkle the cinnamon sugar on top. So the same cinnamon sugar that we sprinkled inside of it, I just took a little pinch of it and sprinkled it right on top of the cookies before they went in the oven, after the egg wash, before they go in the oven. You can use, doesn't have to be cinnamon sugar, you can use like a sparkling sugar, like a really large grain sanding sugar to give it a real nice sparkle and crunch to it. But yeah, you can see that they're nicely golden brown. The bottoms have browned as well. The jam has started to bubble out a little bit. Hold it up closer to the camera. My production crew is giving me directions here. Is that close enough?
Yes.
Okay. So you can see the nice golden brown color on the top. The jam kind of came out the sides on the bottom a little bit. I'm going to break one open for you guys so you can see how beautiful and flaky and crumbly it is. It's really a wonderful cookie. You can see the flaky layers from the butter and the cream cheese there, and that's it. Those are the traditional raspberry Rugalach cookies. I'm going to try one and tell you how wonderful they are. I'm smelling. It's so good. When you taste it, you can definitely taste the flakiness and the layers of the dough. It's not overly sweet because, again, the dough, excuse me. It's not overly sweet because the dough doesn't have sugar in it. So it's not like a punch in the face with a really sweet cookie. You get a little bit of the sweetness from the jam and the cinnamon sugar, but other than that, it's just, it really, it melts in your mouth. Really, really good. So that's our first cooking class, Rugalach cookies. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really enjoyed being with you and being able to share my passion and my love of cooking and baking with you. I look forward to doing this again. Hopefully we'll be doing it again next week. Keep your eyes out on my Facebook page, Bryan's Bakery. Like it if you haven't. Shame on you if you haven't liked it yet. Keep a lookout on there for the topics and what we're going to be doing. I'll post, probably tomorrow, I'll post a poll for which recipe we'll be doing next. And yeah, it'll be fun. Make sure you look at it. I have also set up a GoFundMe page. It was something that I was a little hesitant to do. I don't want it to seem like I'm begging, so I'm not. I just want to give people an option or an opportunity if they desire to donate to the cooking show. Any proceeds that I get from the GoFundMe page will go directly into the cooking show, into buying ingredients, buying equipment, and sharing what I love to do with you guys. So if you decide to donate, thank you so much. If you don't, that is completely fine as well. The shows will always be free for you guys to watch and interact with. Again, I hope you had fun. These cookies are really delicious. They're fun to take to a friend's house, something unique and different to take, something homemade that's easy homemade to do. Something to do while you're stuck at home because of the current situation, if you get bored at home. Most of these ingredients that we use are staple ingredients that people have in their freezer. You should always have a pound of butter in your freezer at all times. And with that, I think we're going to sign off. In the immortal words of Julia Child, bon appetit.